everything just kind of started falling into place. It's really amazing how the political atmosphere, the university atmosphere, and teaching everything really came into place. And we started getting the back support of the government, the state, as well as having like Ed Boyce and others getting involved in the industry. It really just took things to the next level. So my job as a university professor is to, first of all, teach. I work a lot with new growers. That's my main emphasis, is to work with people who are starting in Maryland. Every year we do a new grower workshop. We get anywhere between 20 and 40 people annually in that program. And part of my job there is to scare people away from doing it because, as you may have heard, it's a big cost investment and very big time investment. And we don't want people that are going to take it lightly. We want people who are committed and passionate about this industry, because that's the only way we're going to do it. It is expensive from time and money. We want to make sure if you're going to do it, you're going to do it correctly. So I spend a lot of time with that. And of course I try to work with improving the quality of the wines, teaching, as I talked about, category management, things like that. My main passion and my main interest in helping the industry is to look into the future and see where we're going. I'm a farmer. We're at the great growing is farming. We need to understand the environment. We need to understand, most importantly for today's aspect, the interaction between the environment, which is the soil types, as we talked about, excessively well-drained soils, trying to get low nutrition, no nutrients, and low moisture in there to be able to control the growth of the vine. The climate that we're dealing with, knowing the difference, and we talked about it again in the north central region where we get the diurnal fluctuations, which are really good for growing grapes, but we have a shorter growing season, maybe not being able to get everything right. Eastern shore, where we have longer growing seasons, like hot days, hot nights, and making it a little bit more challenging to get the aromatic and the aroma compounds that we prefer to get in our grape varieties to produce the bottlers. For instance, trying to grow Riesling or Gewürztraminer, at least I'm sure you're just not going to get the characteristics that they get, the beautiful aromas that you get in the fingerlings. And we have to get people to understand that, and if they want to do that, they're going to understand it's not going to work. So my objective is, let's look around the world. We have distinct climates. We have the western mountains and the northern Piedmont. What that area is comparable in geology and in climate to northeastern and northwestern Italy. And you're going to hear Italy coming up. In case you haven't figured out my name, I'm half Italian and half Italian from both sides of my family. So I have a little bit of a bias there, to say the least, but also, to me, Italy and France epitomize the importance of you go to a specific region, they grow specific varieties that are adapted to that region, and they became sometimes originally land races that came from that region. But these are the grapes that do best, grow well in that area. They don't care what the name is. There's the local land races, the local varieties that are growing those years in those areas for hundreds, maybe thousands of years, year in, year out, they get right, year in, year out, they control production. That area knows how to grow grapes, they know how to make wine. And that's the local grapes that are the best. They're not going to grow Cabernet Sauvignon all over Italy because people know the name. They grow various varieties in specific provinces, and that makes a difference. And that's one of the things we need to look at in Maryland and the East Coast, that we're not going to get every variety. When I see Cabernet Sauvignon growing next to Pinot Noir, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if you know anything about France, diametrically opposed, different parts of the country. So that's where I try to help people to learn about is the specific environment between the soils we're dealing with, the climate, length of the growing season, and getting things completely right, as well as cold hardiness that we're dealing with, interacting with the specific varieties. What variety is going to get right at the proper time, get fully ripened in that environment each time. So when I look at the western mountains and the northern Piedmont, I look to northern Italy, I look to Spain, Bordeaux, France, and areas like that. Go to southern Maryland and eastern shore of Maryland, hot days, hot nights, I think okay. Now we're talking southern Italy, Sicily, Portugal, southern Spain, southern France, and now we can find varieties that are growing in similar areas of the world, making great quality wines, but under similar environments that we're dealing with in Maryland. Some of these are already available in the country, some I've had to harass Nova Lines and a bunch of the other nurseries, other nurseries to come up and get these vines in. Nova Lines are wonderful. They have a connection with Roscito, which is the largest grapevine nursery in the world. They're in northeastern Italy. And they've been bringing in Toraldo or Fosco, all these wonderful varieties, specifically into the United States. total of 6 acres, and no plot has more than 20 lines of any one variety. So I have about 150 combinations of variety, environment, and training techniques around the state. Drives me crazy, but it's absolutely so much fun. I get to bring all those grapes back to Western Maryland and make all the individual batches of wine, which ranges somewhere between 100 and 150 each year. Thanks to what I have, Meredith and George right in there. They're two of my wine people there to help me make the wine for the research station. Couldn't do without them, and they've been instrumental in getting these wines here today. So the idea here was to just let you see what we're doing regionally in the state, to come up with different varieties, and I tried to do a combination of things, pure varieties, blends, because again, in some cases pure varieties show well some years or some vintages, and I think that really works. In some cases, to get the complexity and the qualities we need, as they do in Bordeaux, you need to blend to get that consistency of varieties that we talked about, consistency from year to year. One year, you may not get the aromatics, another year, you may not get the mouthfeel you're looking for, the phenolics. So you really need to have something to help you with the vintage variation that we get here in the Eastern United States. And varieties and clones can help you to buffer that. So we have similar varieties that we blend together, as we do with the Bordeaux varieties, where you'll see these first couple of lines here. It gives you some buffering from year to year. When one variety doesn't do well in a hot and dry year, the variety that does best that year may buffer for the one that does best in a cool late year. So that's one of the reasons for doing this. So I know you got wine in front of you, and I'm talking too much. We'll go through these one at a time. First wine on your left, swirl and sniff, and let me see what you have there, please. And some of these are blends, some of these are varietals. And, did everyone look at all the labels on the wines that they were pouring? So some people are cheating, some people are. I usually just do white 1, white 2, red 1, red 2 to let it be completely blind. But in this case, you would, and the first two are blends, so you're not actually going to get the variety. Swirl, sniff, and just tell me what you smell. Boy, this is the quietest I've heard this in 2 days. Just do that. Aroma characteristics? Grapefruit? Absolutely. Floral? Anything more specific to floral? Can you get any more detail than? I'm sorry? Rose? Okay. Orange blossom? Absolutely. One of these varieties we get orange blossom from all the time. In your seeding, just by this description, you're seeing the beauty of blending in some cases. In many cases, we have wines that we just smell the aroma and it's like, okay, just bottle them, go around. And then in some cases, between the aromas or the mouthfeel, I always call it filling in holes. You taste, put a wine in your mouth, oh boy, that's beautiful from palate, and then it just disappears. So that's the beauty of having varieties to blend with, and that you can find holes in the wine, and hopefully you have wines that complement each other that have different holes and different complements that work together, and that's what I found in this particular case. These are wines that these are grapes wines that are produced on the Eastern Shore. We mentioned, you may have heard of Jenny Schmidt. She has Golden Run Vineyards on the northern part of the shore. Very, very hot climate, not far from the Chesapeake, but it's far enough north in the Chesapeake where it's not quite as deep and not getting quite as much moderation. They do get a little bit of diurnal fluctuation, but dealing with late season acids is the main problem with the whites and the olives. So I put a group of varieties in there that we imported from southern Portugal, southern Italy, and southern France and Spain. A bunch of different things to see how they do. This is a blend of 4 of those varieties. Does anyone have any clue, any characteristics that you can sense, any varieties you may pick for this? They're obviously not common varieties that you're aware of. So, Ramonette? Nope. Good guess though. That's one that you might expect. Verdelho. Who said Verdelho? Great job. job. That is one of them, absolutely. And most people can't pronounce that. I guess that one in the wine. Not Sauvignon Blanc in this one. That's even a little too common for me.
Albarino.
Albarino, who said that one? It's over here. Two. We've got two more. And of course, in blending, it's almost impossible, obviously, to guess. What was that? Oh, okay. One surprise here is Colombard. Colombard. And again, this is part of what I do is when I taste varieties in other areas of the country or other areas of the world, I say, okay, that might work in this area I specifically tried it. And then once in a while, I'll just say, because I've had experience like Pinot Gris, where scientifically it makes no sense that we can plant Pinot Gris on the southern eastern shore in Bordelot Winery, harvest it in mid-August when it's hot and dry, and still make beautiful quality Pinot Gris there. It just doesn't make scientific sense as far as the one day place. So that keeps me objective enough saying, you know, throw the science out sometime and just try it. So I've had Colombard that go quite well. We planted them in Colombard that's in here. I make all these separate as a variety, and then I blend it and try again to try it. The Colombard has this beautiful round feeling on your tongue. Dead dry, it really adds an interesting characteristic. Whether that this would be in every vintage or not, these are all 2012 grapes that are in here. And the last one is French, Rhone, Marsanne. Yeah, Viognier would have been one of the common guesses. I do have Viognier. I thought about putting that one in here. That is one of the varietals, but it wasn't in this blend. What I was pointing out there in this blend is kind of the Bedlam type example where I wasn't looking for the real bright fruity aromatic. I was looking for the mouthfeel, the fullness, the uniqueness, something that doesn't taste like anything else in the world, but still has that mineral type experience in your mouth of being a grapefruit wine. And that was the idea of blending this one. 2012 was just a great vintage, especially on the Eastern Shore. Jenny Smith's vineyard was just impeccable, very well managed. And I was able to pick these up, right, and bring them back, fermented 5 gallons of each, and then blended a gallon of each and fit into this particular blend. So again, showing good structure, good acidity, and this is fairly hot climate, so I'm really excited about the potentials of varieties like this for working in the Eastern Shore. Okay, wine number 2.
Joe, can you name the grapes again?
Okay, and that one, there's Albarino, Colombard, Marsanne, and Verdejo, and that is Verdejo. I have Verdejo, also Verdelho, but that's not in this particular blend. There may be a touch of Roussanne in here. I was trying to remember, but I think the Roussanne got into the Marsanne, but that wasn't. They're all about the same percentage. The question was dominating. Yeah, I think they're all about, we made 3 gallons of it. It was a little less than a gallon of each. Trying to make it clear.
What was the origin of those grapes?
Southern France. Verdejo. Yeah, again, Verdejo is Bordeaux mixed up. Southern Spain. One is Southern France and one is Southern Spain. The one here is Southern Spain. Albarino is in the northern part of Portugal, cool area, like areas of snow or areas in that where they get the morning fog. So even though you think it's hot climate in Portugal, it's actually a cool area where they get fog protection there. It does quite well. Colombard, French, and Marsanne, I think I got that right. There are different areas of the world. Okay, wine number 2. Same thing, aromatics. Rose. I know this group's not shy.
Roses.
Roses, okay? Thank you. Lychee, that's the one I was hoping for. One I would use for this.
Gooseberry, honey.
Gooseberry, honey. Quite a few things going on. Again, it's a blend of varieties, so you're going to get so well, and they've been able to do it. They have one of the very nice bone-rich soil, very, very high altitude vineyard there in Frederick County. So they're doing quite a good job with it. But in general, most locations in Maryland have trouble doing aromatic and aromatics type wines. These grapes actually come from the Eastern Shore, from the Y Institute, one of our warmer climate research sites. These varieties were, and I can tell you the variety names, but it's not going to matter a whole lot. It's SK77553, SK771099, and XIB186. There are a number of varieties because they're hybrids. These varieties were made in the old Soviet Union. They imported Vitis amurensis, hybrid, or a Native American variety from the United States that was cold hardy and disease resistant, into the Soviet Union. They're in the center of origin of Vitis vinifera. They got their clones of Vitis vinifera that they liked, crossed it with the American species, to try to come up with cold hardy varieties of grapes that would grow and tolerate the diseases in that area. Some for winemaking in the future, but of course, a lot of it was going to be for vodka production. They were looking for varieties that would grow very well, get the disease resistance from the Americans into the species. Bob Goodman imported these into Missouri in the late 1980s, shared them with me in New Jersey, and we had about 35 of these varieties, and most of them were big busts, not very good, especially most of the reds were not very good. They were very Foch-like, Leon Low-like, not setting. But I latched on to these three that I call Germanic type reds that I've been making this blend at Rutgers and here now for the last about 15 years or so, especially in the last 7 or 8 years here at the University of Maryland. Entering the Maryland Wine Society non-commercial competitions, been winning silver, gold medals every year. And to me, it's just exciting to be able to say we can get this kind of Germanic, Gewürztraminer type style and type of aromatics in grapes that grow extremely well, very cold hardy, more disease resistant than Gewürztraminer, and recently be growing, especially on the Eastern Shore. But most important, the aromatic characteristics and the mouthfeel. Importantly, if you have Gewürztraminer, you want that aroma, you want the leafy nuts and everything, but you really need to have that mineral feel in your mouth. And every time we have Traminette and other comparisons where they try to get an American hybrid that has that Germanic characteristics, I never get that mineral feel on the tongue that I get with these grapes. And I brought this to a bunch of places in New York now recently, and they were really impressed that these are coming from Baltimore hybrid grapes. Sorry, Dan.
So you're starting with a style and trying to mimic it with things that will grow reasonably well in the climate series?
Yeah. The question was, I started with something that kind of indirectly, I'm always looking for aromatic white varieties that under hot conditions will hold their aromatics, white varieties that will have good aromatics under the hot conditions that we get. And these just happen to do that. We had it in Western Maryland and on the Eastern Shore. Western Maryland wasn't surprised that I could, but when I saw these coming out of the Y vineyard, and I do this year in, year out, and literally, like I said, 15 years, almost every year we were able to do this quality wine with no variation. That was real exciting for me, because I'm not willing usually to stick my neck out and say growing all these hybrids. This has been consistent. Yes?
Yeah, Joe, you mentioned that there's some Vitis amurensis in this. Isn't that a southern, didn't it originate in the southern United States?
It's through Mid-Atlantic County through the southern United States, and that was part of the reason they picked that one. They didn't want just the northern, they wanted to deal with the diseases as much as the cold hardiness. So Amaranth still survives cold, but definitely was more of a disease resistant problem. Where they grow grapes in Russia, cold hardiness wasn't the main concern, it was more the disease resistance, but it has shown up as the cold hardiness has shown up. Is there another? Yes?
I just want to make this one. I just want to make sure, so in other words, these were developed for Russian climates, but you thought it would be a good idea to grow it in a warm, humid climate. Yeah, is that right?
No, actually, when we imported them, we weren't expecting them to do well in the warm climate. I got them in New Jersey, northern New Jersey, and in western Maryland, was where I initially planted these when I was at Rutgers in the 80s and 90s, thinking it would do better in the cold. I was thinking cold hardiness there. So it was developed for that, and then I saw the aromatics that were getting. There's another one that has a muscat type aroma, and I saw the aromatics. I wonder if it will work on the Eastern Shore because of the disease resistance. So I planted them as a wide vineyard in the late 90s. And when I started here, I started making the wine. And serendipitously, I've been blessed to have this work. These are we have small commercial plantings and 4 or 5 commercial plantings in Maryland right now. We're looking forward to the first commercial lines coming out of these lines real shortly. The University of Maryland is the only one that has these lines left. They came into Missouri, they were tested by Moose Bordelon, also in Purdue, and most of the other areas of the country gave up on them. So right now, the University of Maryland has exclusive right to these, and we're excited about it. Yes?
If this grape had a name tag and says, "Hi, I'm Chardonnay," what would the name of this grape be?
That's kind of for us to decide. We need to give it a name. If we're going to release it, we are either going to release them as a group for people to plant. The nice part about these is we harvest them all on the same day, even though it's 3 varieties. They all ripen within a window of a couple days. So we've always harvested them.
Okay.
At the same time, we've fermented them separately to keep the variety character to seed from a research standpoint here. But commercially, we would just harvest them all the same day, blend them, and process them into one grape. So even though it's 3 varieties, I see it as 3 varieties handled at one, not have to deal with 3 varieties and blending and all that kind of stuff. Okay, need to move on. Again, the last name ends in a vowel. White wines are fun, but to me, all wines should be red. So, staying with that, again, my objective in research is to come up with full-bodied red wines that just don't taste like green pepper or taste like asparagus when they're grown under poor conditions or don't get quite the ripeness we would like under Maryland and the Atlantic conditions. So, again, cold varieties is really I'm looking at maturing, getting varieties that have good color, which is really critical. As mature as we become as winemakers, unless someone tells you it's Pinot Noir, everyone rates the wine quality by the color. It's just this natural thing. The darker the color, people think it's going to be better. And I know we have a lot of mature people in here, mature palates in here and experience, and then you're past that. But the general public, if they see light red, they're going to think it's going to be a light red wine. So it's nice to have grapes that naturally have the higher pigment. When you're in a hotter climate, again, Eastern Shore, Southern Maryland, the first thing that gives up, besides the acid, is the color. The anthocyanins are part of the phenolic complex. They just don't produce. You need warm days and cool nights to get the sugars accumulated in the plant because the sugar is the base element for the color compounds. So if you have hot nights, sugar respires off. In the evening, everything produced during the day respires off, and you don't have that sugar moiety there to start producing the pigments in your color usually suffers. So again, thinking here, okay, what can we do for varieties that do well in hopefully both areas of the state, but we'll have good color in both areas, we'll get ripe in the west and get good characteristics, but also will tolerate the heat of the eastern and southern shore that will give us good color and good aroma and, of course, acidity-based characteristics. They know, you guys again are experts, you know the grape vintages in Bordeaux. It's always the ripest, hottest vintages, but the ones that last the longest, when you talk about the 61s and the really great vintages, if you talk to the French winemakers, will always say it's the acid backbone. One thing that the color and the astringency, but you really need good acid backbone for the wine to have aging potential. And that's, again, my thought for having good quality wines, food wines, to have a good acid backbone. So this is my next experiment, and again, with that name that starts in a vowel, I always have a bias towards this one. When I saw Southern Maryland conditions, especially way down in St. Mary County, where it's 100 degrees every day in the summer, and it cools down, quote unquote, to 85 at night. I knew that was going to be a challenging environment. But we had the tobacco buyout. People wanted to grow grapes down there. They said, what is the best chance of what we have? I knew it was going to be a challenging Bordeaux varieties down there. Tea Bordeaux has been doing quite well. I said, well, again, here's a chance to look at the Italian varieties, Sangiovese, Barbera, things that hold their acids under the conditions that produce all over Italy. Looking at southern Italy, Negro Amaro, Nero d'Avola, Sagrantino, all these varieties. We have all of these research trials in southern Maryland. Now, one of the things I deal with is, again, being Italian, knowing Italian wines, Nero d'Avola, Sagrantino, these things. I know these wines, I've known these wines for years, but trying to convince a Maryland winery who has to worry about marketing to Maryland how to sell Nero d'Avola, Negro Amaro, Sacratino to people that can barely pronounce Chardonnay, it becomes a challenge. But name recognition is real critical in this industry. So the first one I look towards is this one, because of all the Italian varieties, I was Sangiovese people know for, but variety names in Italy, this is probably the number one. This is Barbera, grown. Now this one is from Western Maryland. This is from my research station. I wasn't going to, I know I've been talking about the heat and the climate, but I absolutely love this wine. So I figured I just wanted to share this one with you. This shows you the beauty of Barbera in a poor climate, which I didn't think Barbera was going to do well in my research vineyard in the northwest part of the state. I thought we were going to have trouble getting it right each year, and it hasn't been the case. It takes a little bit more management. To live something like Sangiovese, it's a high producer, so you really need to thin it down early and get the clusters exposed. But once you put some effort into it early, year in, year out, I've been doing this one since about 2008, 2009, consistently year in, year out. 3 different clones, blending of the 3 clones of Barbera seems to be very, very nice for Western Maryland, and oak aging and delicate use of oak is real critical. So yeah,
Are any wineries start collecting this?
Already growing Barbera right now. We have Slack Winery, which is the southern part of southern Maryland, way down in St. Mary's County. When I first started working with them in the grower workshops, they said, you know, we're an open palate. We want to experiment down here. We have no idea what's going to work. We have no idea what we want to do. We want to have a vineyard. We want to try. You're thinking of, it doesn't matter what the variety's called, whatever grows best. If we can grow good grapes, we can make great wine. So they were very open to that. The first one I recommended for them was Barbera. But they planted it, and they started getting their crop. They were selling a lot of their grapes to Alcott. Woodhull. How many people know Alcott, Woodhull Winery? And again, he wasn't mentioned much today. One of the instrumental people when he growing this industry in the 2000s. He came to me one day and said, Joe, he says, you do a lot of great work for Maryland, but we need more Cabernet. We need more Merlot. We need varieties that people know. This Barbera stuff. I know you're Italian, but he's just very passionate and very, well thought out of what he does. And he was thinking from his winery and his marketing standpoint. I said, this is Southern Maryland. Just give me a little bit of latitude here and see what happens. He buys Barbera from Slack Winery at the time. They weren't a winery. It makes 1 barrel. 55 gallons of it. He calls me up and said, I apologize. He says, I never would have anticipated. He said, we had a barrel tasting, we have 1 barrel of it. We sold futures for $32 a bottle, and it sold out in 1 day at the barrel tasting. So, again, it's 1 barrel, but he saw that just growing, he was worried about marketing, and I understand that, but great grapes, growing in great areas, produce good wine. People come in and taste our wines. They're not able to pronounce it. They can taste what's in the glass. They'll buy it and how it works. And that's my thinking with this one. This rival Italian Barberas, I think it's right in there with some of the best I've had from Barbera d'Alba. There's things like that. We have Virginia is producing a couple great wines, Italian wine based. One in Virginia doing a great job. But I think this is a good example of what we can do